Welcome, everybody, to our Ask Me Anything session. And I'd like to introduce our subject matter experts for search and data, Sean Graber, Chris Byers, and Robert Florence. And we thought we would start things off by just asking if anybody here has questions from the boundaries announcement that was made today. Well, it's a quiet group. So Sean, I'm always curious about understanding what goes on under the hood. And I was wondering maybe, after listening to the Vericent use case, if you could talk a little bit about how Boundaries powers what Vericent is doing and, kind of give people a look behind the curtain.
Yeah, I'd love to actually maybe kick that over to Chris because he's our resident expert and the product lead on our Boundaries product. But I would like to briefly introduce myself. Thank you all so much for joining us for the first hour and for popping into our AMA. We're happy to answer questions about Boundaries, about search, about Mapbox data, really anything in between. But I'll just briefly say that my name is Sean Graber. I'm the head of geocoding here at Mapbox, and I lead a few teams, one of which is our great Boundaries product. And then I do a lot with search, both our geocoding APIs, SDKs, and then a couple more niche products that we have. A great example of that is address autofill. And be happy to answer any questions about that or even walk you all through just an overview of our products. But I think to answer Mike's question about how Vericent's using our Boundaries data to power their sales territory planning and other revenue management tools, I think Chris is the best person. He really is the resident expert on Boundaries. And I think he can give us a quick spin through how they're using our technology to build a really great product.
Sure. So first of all, I'm Chris Byers. I'm the product manager for location intelligence here within the search org at Mapbox, which includes Boundaries, as well as some interesting, cool stuff around reverse POI geocoding and other things. So in terms of Vericent, they're using our Boundaries product in the way that a lot of our other customers, we have kind of a variety of use cases that fall into Boundaries. And one of the big ones is really this sales territory planning or AOI planning use case. And Boundaries is a good fit for that, especially if you're using it internationally, because we have really finely grained, really accurate boundaries for things like postal codes or administrative areas in most of the major markets, or actually all of the major markets globally. So Vericent is using us in that vein. And what they're primarily using is a combination of our admin levels, which are, you can think of that as any boundary that's set by a governmental body, whether that's the federal or state or municipal government, if you're thinking in terms of the US, for instance. And also they're using our postal boundaries. The cool thing about postal boundaries within Mapbox Boundaries dataset is that we make them ourselves in most cases. So if you're relying on, say, the US Census and Postal Service to update those boundaries, it's a 10-year wait time. They fall out of date very quickly, and they're actually kind of inaccurate in a lot of places. So we actually take our address data plus some additional sources, and we derive those boundaries ourselves to make them as accurate and up-to-date as possible. The Postal Service does add or change postal boundaries several times a year, generally speaking. So we do have to keep updating those regardless of the 10-year update cycle. So that's kind of the basic data reason that Vericent's using our boundaries. We also offer the ability to use those boundaries as part of a map tile service, which is super fast and super awesome. And it allows you to combine the boundaries into shapes on the fly so that you can build out these sales planning areas. And it's just a really nice user interface for your folks to build whatever they need to suit your areas and suit your needs. That's it.
That's cool. And I know that, revenue planning and sort of sales territory planning is a pretty big use case. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, if that's okay. Of course, to our participants, anyone who wants to unmute, hop in, ask a question, or do so in the chat. we're monitoring that. But I'm curious, Chris, maybe a two-part question for you. As the product owner of Boundaries, there are other products out there that have these sort of polygons and areas of various levels of granularity around the world. I'm curious, like, what is it that you really like about Boundaries, and what do you think kind of sets it apart, and what does that really mean for customers with particular use cases? Like, where does our product really kind of stand out? Like, for what types of things?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of like key things about Boundaries that stand out in the market. Number one, all of our boundaries are topologically correct. There's no, they're all edge matched. In other words, there's no gaps, there's no overlaps. If you were to use this data set for geocoding, which some of our users do, you would never have a point that falls into no man's land where you don't know what the heck it is. When you're talking about the visual aspect of Boundaries, that's also a really nice boon to have, is that no matter how deep you go on your zooms, it's always going to be seamless and pretty and just gorgeous. The other thing that's awesome about Boundaries is our depth and breadth of coverage globally. We're really unmatched in this, other than maybe one or two other competitors out there in the market, into how deep we go into some of these various geographies. We're one of the only providers that has a 6-digit postcode layer for Canada, for instance. And that goes down to like 3 houses. So it's very granular data, and it's very precise data. That's really one of our biggest key use cases and value drivers for this data set is just how incredibly deep it is. The other thing that stands apart is our ability to accommodate worldviews. So this was mentioned in the keynote as well, but we do have around 8 or 9 worldviews that are available so that maps can be built according to the political requirements of a particular area. And all of those, again, are seamless no matter how you're using it, and it can be built to whatever specification you need.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that I never realized, but we've actually seen requests come into us, is that people who display maps in certain countries around the world are actually legally required in certain instances to show either their area of the world or other areas of the world in a particular way with particular names. And it's, fascinating, frankly, from a geopolitical standpoint to think about that. But it's, it's interesting that we do support that ability. So regardless of where your users are, you can stay compliant with whatever the local regulations are in that area related to the display of these kinds of disputed regions.
It's fascinating, and it's a lot of work. Keeping all that stuff up to date with changes geopolitically around the world is a challenge, and we have an amazing team that builds this product that keeps all of that up to date. And we work with customers actually to make sure that the people who are in this area are actually our primary motivators and feedback loop on making sure that these are correct. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I'm always struck by the amount of changes that we make, but it's not due to the fact that our data is wrong, but really due to the fact that the world changes at an incredible rate. And when you think about keeping these boundaries up to date, at these various levels, some administrative, some statistical, some legislative, these boundaries are changing all the time. Maybe not in one area, but across the world, there's just so much change to keep up with. It's quite a task. It almost feels like we're pushing the boulder up the hill constantly, but it's fun.
Yeah, you don't really think about countries' boundaries changing that much, right? You think of it as being kind of static. But like in our last update, we had whole new redistricting from Indonesia and Malaysia, and a bunch of stuff changed in Cambodia. And it's just like administrative level changes, the way that we're dividing some of these countries up. And then, of course, I already mentioned the Postal Service. They change stuff all the time. So it is actually relatively challenging to keep up with all this stuff. So it's pretty cool.
During the main session, there were some questions around Search API, and maybe the three, maybe you could talk a little bit about our data and how it powers search, and kind of talk about what people can be expecting in the next several months with search and our API.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And maybe actually to facilitate that a little bit easier, I might ask if I can just share my screen and show a couple of things here. Um,
Sure.
just to back up a little bit, Mapbox, we really started, our roots 10, 15 years ago, are a map company. And I think that's how a lot of people come into the ecosystem or have been with us for a very long time, are these very performant and frankly, very beautiful maps. And so that's really where we started. But today, I think we mentioned this during the main session as well. Our mission as a company is really to power navigation for people, packages, and vehicles everywhere. This is, Mapbox's reason for existing. And when you think about where we started and where we are now, search is really that glue that brings this map together with this navigation component. You have to know where you are, where you want to go. You might want to discover what's around you, what points of interest, what addresses, categories of things like coffee shops or brands like Starbucks. And so search really unites those two experiences to empower people to go around the world, or to empower the package or the food delivery or whatever the case might be to get to your door, your office, or your hotel. And so search is really integral. It really fits into this whole story of Mapbox in a very sort of important way. We have sort of organized our products in this way. It's kind of a bit of a house, I suppose, if you want to look at it like this. But I'll walk through a little bit of how this starts from our data, goes into our products, and then goes into this rich metadata that we use to enrich the sort of results that you can get from the geospatial database that we have. And I'll sort of pick and show you how the products that you see here are actually almost like a disaggregation of the search SDK or product that we have that's currently in private beta. So as Mike alluded to, really like the foundation for all of the really exciting things that we do in search is our data. This data consists of addresses, places, regions, countries, certain data elements like postcodes, points of interest, boundaries like Chris was talking about, and maybe some data sets that don't immediately come to mind. We have 700-800 million people out there with Mapbox on their phones or in their cars, going about their lives and helping us collect in a very privacy first way telemetry data, so we can see what's happening with traffic and movement. And in fact, we have two data sets called traffic and movement that show real-time and historical changes of people either on roadways or just out in the world on foot. And all of this, we sort of take this and we combine it in really interesting ways so that we can serve up answers to questions that help our customers solve really challenging problems. But we don't stop there. Our perspective as Mapbox, as a company that deals with data and sort of like this intimacy that we've developed with data, we realize that there's just no single provider that has the best data, the most complete data, the most up-to-date or comprehensive data at any one place at any one point in time for a given place in the world. And so while we have troves of data ourselves, we also work with lots of providers. And really the secret sauce, or sort of the magic that we bring to all of this, is the technology that conflates all of these things. So I can show in a couple of slides, but I'll just share, for a given address in the United States, for example, we might have 15 or 20 data points, all with varying levels of accuracy. And, the magic that we do is to sort of assign, levels of fidelity or veracity to each of those sources and combine them in interesting ways so that we create the single best golden record for that one particular address. And we do that at scale for every address and every point of interest that we have across the entire world. And so that, is sort of purposefully at the bottom of the slide, because it really is sort of the fundamental piece of where search starts. We have to have really great data. And again, we have our own, we combine that with data from partners, and we acquire data regularly, and we're sort of always, trying to keep up with the way that the world changes. Another really important piece that we bring to the mix is our corrections. So algorithmically, through all the telemetry that we collect, we're constantly updating our maps, but then we also have tens of thousands of submissions a year from customers who tell us that, an address or a point of interest may be incorrect or needs to change. And we have a really tremendous human in the loop system whereby a human being actually checks each of these submissions to make sure that it's right. And if so, pushes it to production. And for address data, at least, that sort of gets into our production data set in as little as a day or two. So the turnaround is really quite remarkable, and it adds an additional layer of value on top of sort of the conflation and merging of all these various data sources that we do sort of in the regular course of our business. And so that's kind of that foundation. And then as you see going from left to right, these three blocks or these three pillars, these are sort of our three product suites that enable our customers to extract information from that data so that they can make decisions or help someone find where they want to go, maybe find, the place where they need to deliver a package. And so going from left to right, we've got this Discover, Geocoding, and Intelligence product suite. On the left, Mike, going a little bit back to your question, this Discover product is a lot of what is in this private beta of our search SDK. This includes it's really a product that is intended for a human user who is doing a flexible search. This is the product that we provide to our automotive customers, Toyota, GM, and others, that serves the in-car user experience. So, I'm driving along a route, or maybe I'm looking for a coffee shop or a Starbucks or a particular address of a coffee shop that I want to go to. And I want to do that in a way where results are going to be suggested to me. I can sort of go back, I can go forward, and sort of have that dynamic experience to find what's around me and then ultimately decide where to go. And that's sort of that Discover piece. It's these, what we would call forward searches that are highly interactive and include, all of the different data types that we have kind of in our data set, maybe with the only exception being boundaries. In the middle.
So that actually is a good opportunity to ask this question that somebody's put in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Because you mentioned automakers, and this question is related to public transportation. Question regarding access to public transportation, for instance, working and getting queries of the bus station lat and long. Is that possible? Are the data embedded, or should I find the data, import it into tile sets myself? If so, which sources do you suggest to get the data?
Chris, I might kick that question over to you. I know that we have some of this certainly in our POI data set, but maybe you have a little bit better answer.
Yeah, so currently we do have bus stations and other public transit POIs as a part of our POI data set that's available within Discover. However, we're kind of building that subset of data out currently. We're exploring a few different options for how to source public transportation information globally. So it's not as complete as some of our other subsets of POI data. If you were wanting to use this immediately, I would definitely recommend pursuing that through some open sources and creating your own tile sets to build that out in the meantime. I have a couple of notes on where to get public transportation data that I can kind of dig up here in the background and see if I can share here a little bit.
And I love having questions from the group. There's another one here about with respect to addresses and places, is there an upcoming capability to position pins in the third dimension? For example, the third floor of a 20-story building.
I think the short answer to that is it's not currently on the roadmap, but it's something that I know we've discussed here at Mapbox in the past, and I think it's a very interesting idea. One way to sort of understand where that pin might be, oftentimes buildings that are that large, have additional address elements, maybe an optional address line with a suite number or a floor number. And so, that might not be exactly, Brad, what you're getting at, but there certainly is a way within sort of an address string to denote where, a particular place is in a large building like that. I think this is really an interesting idea. I'd love, I don't know, in the chat or otherwise, if you would be willing to share, what you're thinking or what your use case might be. We really pride ourselves at sort of innovating with our customers. So it's really helpful for us to understand what use cases are out there. And, that really helps us prioritize our roadmap. And I think it's a really interesting idea, and actually related to one thing that we're launching in early 2023, which is this location details API that provides additional metadata about a particular address, point of interest, or other data element. And one of the data points that we have about addresses, or at least some addresses, is whether or not they are part of high-rise buildings, what the geometry of the building that they pertain to is like. Is it really large? Is it not? This is really important for our customers in delivery and logistics. It helps them better deliver actually in the delivery experience, but also better estimate delivery times to those places because it's a proxy, oftentimes for complexity. And yeah, Brad, I'd love to reach out and learn a little bit more. I think to summarize, there are a couple of things that we're doing that are sort of around the edges, but not exactly what you're asking about. So would love to learn a little bit more. And we're actually in the process right now of, putting together draft roadmaps for the next year. So this is actually a really great time, to share ideas with us so that we can, consider them and hopefully get them on the roadmap so we can build some pretty cool new solutions. Cool, Mike. It looks like we have another question coming here in the chat.
So I'm working on a project which is an AR mobile game, a bit like Pokemon Go. I'm looking for a data set with safe, playable points of interest, which I can use to populate the game world. I did find some information using Mapbox and Unity, but unfortunately, I'm not using Unity. So it seems like it's in there somewhere, but do you have any recommendations on how I might be able to leverage Mapbox to get this sort of data in some other cost-effective way?
Chris, I'm not sure if you're going to jump in on this one. Otherwise, I will.
I don't have much information on the actual product, but we do have our playable places data set that we just recently built that's going out to some of the actually larger video game developers out there. That does exactly what you're talking about. It categorizes places based on a tile set that are safe or playable or no-go areas for people who are using AR style to play. Now, in terms of how to get in touch with the product team for that, Sean might have more information there.
Yeah, Brian, how about I follow up after this, and I can make maybe if you would be okay with leaving your email, or Mike, if we have Brian's email by virtue of sign up, I can certainly connect you, Brian, to the Mapbox Playable Location team, because I think you'll be really happy that we have a product that is actually just tailor-made for exactly the use case that you're describing, and some pretty big customers that are beginning to work with this. I believe some located in the Japanese market. So it's actually a really exciting product. I'm happy that you asked about it. It's not exactly my area of expertise, but I'd love to connect you to the product owner and get you sort of in the priority list over there. Awesome. Well, I'll happily take that as an action item. Awesome. Thanks for the email, Brian. I really appreciate it. Mike, I'm happy to just maybe finish out just talking through this slide. I'll be really quick, and then we can see if any other questions materialize here in the chat, or maybe you have some yourself. But I described Discover being a really flexible search that includes points of interest, addresses. It's really intended for a human who's trying to discover what's around. Conversely, maybe we'll pause. I'd much rather answer questions, so maybe we can pause here. I'll just read the question out loud for everyone's benefit here. But I had the same question regarding bike sharing stations or park and ride locations. These are things that I found missing in the Mapbox data set. And it sounds like maybe I'm not totally understanding the last part of this, but it sounds like maybe just looking for a little bit of advice, perhaps on how to better search for this type of data in the Mapbox data set, or any other guidance. And Chris, actually, in addition to leading boundaries, is also a resident expert in POI data. So would love it if you had any perspective there, Chris.
Sure. I think Actually, bike sharing and like ride sharing is not currently a category that we can search on for POIs. We have a relatively limited subset of POI categories currently in production. And actually, if you're using our V5 geocoder to search for POIs, you're not going to see a whole lot in there. That's kind of been deprecated as an updated data set and focused more on address data going forward. Our updated POI data is going to be part of that Discover product offering, and then later our intelligence offering that allows you to search for POIs by not just category, but also brand and other segmented styles of search. So this may be something that we can address when those products come to market or are available in private preview, which should be soon. I'm going to let Sean talk to the timing there. But in terms of the categories of POI, parking is actually, I handle a lot of the data acquisition and data management for all of search for our data, and parking is one of the priorities for 2023 in terms of better parking data available through search globally. So it's interestingly enough, it's one of our most searched categories through the private preview of Discover. So that is on our roadmap, but I'll look into the POI categories that correspond to the things you mentioned and see if that's something that we currently support or if that's something we would need to add in order to support those searches.
Thank you for answering that, Chris. And thank you, and thank you so much for the question. I think it's a phenomenal question. And you know, the world is changing so much, and things like bike sharing stations pop up, it seems like, all over the place all the time. So we're always you know, looking out for these types of categories that our customers are looking for, so that we can go out and understand if it's a really an urgent need that we can go find a data provider to help us solve. So I'm happy to share. I know I've tried to say I'm going to finish this slide. I'd love to just kind of go really quickly through and just share that, you know, geocoding is a longstanding product at Mapbox. It's really a product that is focused on address, changing addresses into coordinates and vice versa. And it's a little bit more geared towards customers with bulk data processing needs or really automated workflows. There is absolutely an autocomplete piece of this that can serve human beings that are entering addresses. And in fact, we have a product called Address Autofill, which is intended to do exactly that for internet forms that require addresses. There's a couple of very cool features that are built in there to make the delivery experience better. But this is primarily you know, something that benefits our customers in business intelligence, e-commerce, logistics. And again, it's really the translation of human readable addresses into coordinates, so we can route people or, you know, clean up databases, things like that. And then lastly, this piece, intelligence, is also within Chris's product portfolio. And this is a bit of an emerging offering that we're developing through 2023. But this includes a lot of reverse searches, not only to addresses, but also to points of interest. And we work with customers in this area that do things like content tagging or tracking of you know, humans, or tracking of assets, or in some cases, we have the largest pet tracking company. They have a very, very cool tracking collar for dogs and maybe for cats, but primarily for dogs. And so we work with them to help customers across all of those verticals understand where their assets are at a given point in time, where they've been for a variety of reasons. And then lastly, you know, the little roof here on our house is another API that we'll be launching in Q1 2023 called Location Details, that given a result from any one of these three services, returns more information. So if you're thinking about a point of interest, it's open hours, it's reviews, it's photos, lots of, you know, sort of qualitative information, maybe what cuisine a particular restaurant is. It depends a bit on category, but all of the rich details that you might want to know about. Sorry, did I hear someone break in there? Anyone, please feel free to jump in. but then that details would return, additional address data. We talked a little bit before about the size of a particular building when we had the question about whether we could geocode it to a particular elevation. For boundaries, there's also metadata available that describes counties and other sorts of administrative and statistical regions. And it varies a little bit by data type. So that's just a little bit of the lay of the land of our search world, what we have today, and a little bit of a preview of some of the exciting things that we're going to be launching in 2023. The reality is there's actually quite a bit that's going to be coming online in 2023 that's going to be able to really expand the use cases that we'll be able to serve. And then we're always looking, within these products to find ways to add data like, maybe it's bike sharing or, transit terminals, things like that. And I'll echo Mike here in the chat and just say anyone who's joined recently or even has been here all along, feel free to just chime in, interrupt us, ask questions, or of course, as others have, feel free to jump in the meeting chat.
Sean, I'm going to ask you another one. There's a tool I use in my job every day to visualize data, which is Tableau. And Tableau is actually a big customer of Mapbox and using Mapbox boundaries. And I think a lot of people might also be users or at least familiar with Tableau. And I thought maybe it'd be good to give them a little bit of a look under the hood about like, how are they using it? How does it improve the experience for their customers?
Yeah, I'd love to give my take as sort of a longtime Tableau user. I think I was, first used Tableau maybe a decade ago when it was really first hitting the scene, and it was very obvious that it was going to quickly sort of take the world by storm. But Chris, I'd love to kick it over to you afterwards to maybe share, your experience working directly with Tableau. But some ridiculous percentage of data that corporations have has some geographic component. I've heard estimates 75 to 90%. And I think what's so interesting about Tableau is that it enables, a really like a regular sort of person or user to unlock pretty advanced capabilities with relatively little knowledge. You can go just way beyond what you can do with an Excel spreadsheet in Tableau. And I think, the geospatial component of Tableau is maybe the best example of that. It can be actually really challenging to do things with maps. I think Mapbox does a particularly good job at making sort of more complex mapping applications really friendly. But to use Mapbox, you really do have to be a developer, have a development team that can use our products in a way that makes them, usable to do lots of different things. And Tableau is much, it's a different audience. It's a B2C application. And so what's exciting and what I've used Tableau to do in the past is, take data and create choropleth maps or, heat maps where you can sort of segment the world by state or by county. You can drop, data on. Before in a previous life, I was a, management consultant, and I can recall looking at, federal contract awards by where the firms are that won them and where federal spending was happening and how that was changing over time. And so being able to create these, time series visualizations on top of geospatial is pretty cool. You can really quickly extract insights from this data by seeing where things are happening and how those things are evolving in time, in space and over time, it's actually really amazing that an application can enable you to do that. And what's under the hood there is Mapbox boundaries. The way in which they know a particular data point, given a coordinate, resides in this county or in this state or in this town is our boundaries data set. And as Chris said before really well, this is an extremely high quality product. Maybe the coolest or highest quality aspect of it is this topological correctness. There's no gaps and there's no overlaps. So when you're plotting data, you don't have to worry that you're not sure that it falls within one district or another, or it falls into a no man's land in between two places, which is really important when you're making business critical decisions that depend on how you aggregate data into various geographical bins. And you could imagine the chagrin of a salesperson who, a lead that falls in two territories, and how do you sort of adjudicate that? That's not going to happen when you're using Mapbox boundaries. And so really anytime you're in Tableau, and for those of you who may not have used Tableau or be particularly familiar, I would encourage you to Google Tableau Viz of the Day. This is a pretty cool website that Tableau has set up, where Tableau users can upload really neat visualizations that they've made. And I believe there's some curation. Tableau might pick one or more each day to feature on that site. And if you go in, you can see, I mean, about half of them or more have some geospatial component to it. And really, anytime you see a geospatial visualization from Tableau, that's powered by Mapbox. We sort of power their the geospatial hierarchy that enables the aggregation and visualization on the platform. And it's been an incredible partnership. I mean, they're one of, I think, the most exciting customers that we have to work with, because we get to bring sort of the power of Mapbox to any person with a Tableau license. And that's just, it's really exciting to think about all the analyses that we power with all the millions of Tableau users that exist around the world. So Chris, I know you've actually been, in closer, you work even closer with them than I do. So I don't know if you have any sort of interesting examples to share yourself.
So a lot of the use cases that we hear from Tableau are actually relating to the depth of like the granularity that comes in and the hierarchical matching, because within the boundaries data set, you have hierarchical join keys. So every administrative level knows what higher level administrative zone they're a part of. So for instance, your counties know what state they're in, and your states know what country they're in. But you can use that to build visualizations that then expand as you zoom out, or have sub relationships within them. That's one of the primary things that they call us out on, for our ability to provide that with a very strong level of granularity globally, and especially in those postal zones and administrative zones in Western Europe, say, where there's not great coverage elsewhere.
So we had a question that came in while you were speaking. Are there any blogs comparing Mapbox geocoding accuracy, in parentheses, rooftop, with other services?
Yeah, Jay, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly there, or your initials. I appreciate the question. I don't think that we have any blogs that I can think of in recent memory, but I do look forward to putting out. And Robert here is the leader of our geocoding product suite. And so, Robert, I'll kick it over to you if you want to tell me that we're not going to do this. But I think you can expect us to come out, with a blog, in Q1, where we talk a lot about our quality. One of the things that we've invested pretty heavily in over the past half was a way to, systematically benchmark and measure our quality over time. What's really interesting, I think, is that, this is, while it seems like that would be a straightforward sort of thing to take on, it's actually really complicated. There's questions of, what is accurate in certain cases. And, we're working through a really sound and defensible methodology that we can use consistently internally to benchmark our own quality, but also to share, our quality benchmarks with the world. And then, Jen, one of the things that we do, typically with our enterprise customers, is run customer evaluations. So the way that typically works is that a customer will share with us maybe a set of addresses that their customers have tried to search, or in a lot of cases, problematic addresses that other geocoding providers have actually not been able to find or find satisfactorily. And then we go and, we'll sort of, run that against our geocoder. Oftentimes we have our team of geospatial analysts actually manually look at the results to uncover what might be going on. And what we're really trying to do is take that evaluation process, productize and systematize it so that we can share that. But we're really putting it through the ringer because we want to be quite thoughtful and rigorous about how we construct this. So one of the things that we really want to do with it is write a blog post and share this out. But we're kind of in the process right now of refining that. And it's actually been like a very exciting project that we've embarked upon, and I think we're kind of nearing the end. So maybe it's, we don't have anything today, but definitely look out. And I'd love to sort of, take down your information so that when we do publish that, we can share it with you, or maybe even give you, a sneak peek and see if what we're working on sort of answers the questions that you might have.
And I want to also express that we are always open to having developers and customers write guest blogs with us, and they can take a couple different forms. It could be Q&A. I mean, you might actually want to posit questions to us where you're very curious about how can we help you solve a problem, or how to solve a problem, and we want to create thought leadership opportunities for our customers. And please always, feel free to send a note to me directly if you like, mike.banik@mapbox.com. And I'm in marketing, I don't bite, so I'd be very, very willing to welcome you onto our platform. There's yeah, sometimes it's the blinking cursor is something that can be put a stop to us right in our tracks. So yeah, we'd be happy to co-author with you for sure. So as I think about the audience here, Chris, Sean, and Robert, one question some of them may have if they haven't been using some of our services yet is, what sets Mapbox boundaries, search, or data apart from other solutions that are available in the market? Why do customers choose Mapbox?
Chris, you want to kick it off with the boundaries came first in that list. So do you want to share? I know you kind of highlighted some of the items before, but I don't know that everyone was here for that.
Sure. Well, obviously customers choose Mapbox boundaries because we're awesome. And I mean, that's the long and short of it. We have better geographic coverage, better depth of coverage than almost any other offering out there on the market. The Mapbox tile service is incredibly fast. You can build a really super responsive, beautiful map with our data. And then we also have that super high quality, topologically correct, edge matched data that is hierarchically joined, and you can do super awesome stuff with that. Again, nobody else really has available in that form factor. So that's our big selling point is the quality, the coverage, speed, and our agility or ability to accommodate worldviews and other map styles that need to be used globally.
Yeah, I would echo that and say something similar for geocoding in particular, but I think search overall. And maybe there's like three parts to this. And the first part is just sort of the service itself. So you mentioned it, Chris. Geocoding it's very fast. It's very high quality. We don't have any issues with our service ever going down. It's accurate in the markets where we operate. And I think one of the things that we're working on and working towards is really truly global coverage. Today we excel in North America, Western Europe, Oceania, namely Australia and New Zealand. But there are gaps and actually I'll mention Japan is actually where maybe we have truly industry leading coverage with our partners there from an address standpoint, Eastern Europe as well. But there are, some areas of Europe, some areas of South America, the African continent, where we definitely need to make improvements. We have excellent places search. So when you think about towns and cities and things like that, but when it gets down to the streets and addresses, we have a lot of data sitting on the sideline that we haven't yet brought into our production ecosystem. And that's one of the big goals that we have for 2023. And really by the end of 2024, we aspire to truly global address coverage. So it's certainly an area in which we want to make a lot of progress. But outside of those areas where we don't purport to have this coverage, it's quality, speed, it's accuracy in those markets. I'll say two more things for search. One is just being a part of this Mapbox ecosystem. So you have search, you can drop our pins on Mapbox maps, and you can do data aggregation and analysis if you have a boundaries license. And really, the more you work with Mapbox, both in terms of the volume that you consume on any product, but also the more products you use together, so like the more power you can kind of extract. And I think that there's a real advantage to sort of using Mapbox's search products because they integrate so well with all the other things that you probably want to use, right? Because search is oftentimes paired with maps, and maps with navigation of some sort. And so that's really great. And the third thing I'll mention is just we have an incredible corrections pipeline infrastructure that enables us to take feedback from the world. And that comes in the form of telemetry of, again, people walking around with phones or driving around in cars or on scooters or bikes, and use that to sort of create this positive feedback loop that makes our maps better every single day. But then we also have people that submit corrections to us. And you can do this if you want to check it out later today, mapbox.com/contribute. You can change addresses and things. You can submit changes to us. But those are not going to go live. They're actually going to go to a real human being who's going to look at them, do research on potentially other websites and consult various sources, look at the sort of the nature of the change, the magnitude of the change, figure out whether or not that's real or not. And if it's real and it's a good change, maybe we had some sort of inaccuracy or missing data, they're going to push that to our production data set. And that's going to be live within a couple of days. And we're also going to notify you about that change. So it's pretty cool. We're able to, the world changes really quickly and we're able to respond to that. And, we have this internally, at least, this concept of this living map that's always changing in the ways that the world changes and the ways that we interact with that. And it's pretty cool. It's actually really remarkable to see it in person. And I think people appreciate that responsiveness to issues that they have come up. We're able to sort of adjudicate those and sort of move on them very quickly.
One other thing on the geocoding API side that makes us a little bit different as well is that we offer permanent geocoding. Most of our competitors, you're not really allowed to cache or store the result that you get back from a geocoding query. So we kind of open up some new use cases where you might want to kind of store the location of drop-offs of certain packages for reporting purposes, permanently store a user's address for registration of a new product, something like that. So I think that's a feature that differentiates us a little bit on the geocoding API.
Yeah, that's a great point, Robert. And I think there's, I don't want to talk too much about some of the ideas that we have kind of more experimentally in the hopper for 2023, but I think we're really excited about, looking at some of our customers' core use cases in how do we solve the last mile delivery, for instance. What unique maybe data assets can we bring to bear on that problem that will really help these companies do this better, take out costs, be more profitable. And so I think that there's a lot that we can do just building on top of really core geocoding capabilities to help our customers. And I am very excited about what we have planned to test and bring into market in 2023 that builds on top of geocoding and sort of differentiates in pretty interesting ways. I know we're coming up on time here, Mike. I definitely want to encourage folks in the audience who might be shy to ask any questions that y'all might have, either audibly here in the chat. I'm sure you have more though, Mike, if no one has any.
Actually, one thing I remember is when we first started working together, search autofill, and one of the business cases that I remember was helping people avoid cart abandonment, and I'm just kind of curious, like when there's a lot of business applications for search and that some people don't necessarily think about right away. I was wondering, maybe you want to expand on that, and then also maybe talk about others that you think people may not automatically have come to the top of their mind.
Yeah, that's such a good one. And from my standpoint professionally, I come from more of like a B2C kind of background, e-commerce and all of that. And so most recently at TripAdvisor, a company that is extremely focused on optimizing. And this is a 20-year-old company, in a very competitive industry. And we would do a lot of A/B testing. And so, I'm very familiar with sort of these seemingly small changes that have very big impacts on user behavior, and a few percentage points here or there mean more sales, more revenue for the same amount of effort, the same sort of input. You can just get more out of it because your site is easier to use. And I think this address autofill product is a really good example of that. We all have this, this experience, right, where you're on your phone and you want to buy something, and then you get hit with this page, and it's like really hard to use, and you have to put in your address, and it doesn't work, and you sort of we've all had this experience, and what do we do most of the time? Well, most of the time we bounce. We say, oh, I'll get to this later. I'll do it later. And then maybe we do, but maybe we don't. In the worst cases, people get really fed up with the experience and they say, you know what, I'm just going to go buy it on Amazon. I'm just going to go buy it on, insert whatever retailer here. And it's not always address auto, sort of completing the address component of these forms isn't always the culprit. But it is an opportunity for companies to just make the experience easier, make it more seamless. And that's exactly what this product is designed to do, both in the way that it enables users to enter their address and get suggestions right away in a single box, and not have to click through a bunch of different boxes. But it also, once you find your address, it shows you a visual representation of that. And it actually even lets you sort of fine tune the pin. So in the unlikely event that the pin is in the wrong house or the wrong place, you can change that. But what we see folks interested in doing is actually moving the pin from, maybe in their driveway to their side door or to their back door or their front door, to sort of fine tune that delivery experience. And I'm sure many of us have had experiences of getting packages stolen or delivered to the wrong place. And so, address autofill really helps, confirm you have the right place. You're not sending your package to the office instead of your house. But then also within that place, really share exactly where you want your boxes dropped off, so you can get them and know that they're there and know that they're safe. So it seems like a small part of the experience, but for folks in retail, in e-commerce, and especially with sort of multi-channel, omni-channel retail sort of experiences taking off, any sort of efficiency that you can gain or sort of reliability in sort of, address capture and delivery is really meaningful to the bottom line. And so it is a really interesting example of, actually sort of a use case that might not immediately come to mind, Mike. I don't know. There aren't any others that come to mind necessarily related to delivery, but I think it's a really good example. And that product we built really targeted towards solving that. And in fact, I had a really cool conversation with a developer, and just a quick aside, a developer in Norway this morning who just implemented this. He's building it's a property management system for landlords in Norway. And he mentioned that he had this product up and running in 15 minutes and was really complimentary. And we built it so it's super easy. We know that companies, like, the most exciting thing that a company does in the quarter is not going to be replace address autofill. But we know it's important. And so we built this so that, 15 or 30 minutes, you can have it up and running, and you can see that sort of, that conversion rate increase on checkout pages and similar.
That's great. And then actually the ease of using Mapbox is something I hear from our customers all the time. But there's something I also want to ask about, is just like, how easy is it to integrate some of these things together, like search and boundaries and autofill? Because I think that also is one of the things that makes a platform appealing to developers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the cool things about search is that we have a format that I don't believe we've invented, but certainly championed over the years, called GeoJSON, and we get these sort of search responses in this format that enables us to just really seamlessly drop the responses into like Mapbox Studio or put it on a Mapbox map and sort of plot those very, very easily. So in that sense, the interplay between search and maps is really, really plug and play. I'll kick it over to Chris in a moment. I think the integration with boundaries is something actually that we want to work on making a lot easier. And we have a couple of exciting ways that we're going to tie this data more closely together. But it is, we do see our customers using boundaries and geocoding to do analysis of how many points are within a boundary, or in sort of different spatial joins and sort of ways of aggregating data to unlock, sort of insights for business intelligence. So there's definitely a lot that's happening there. But maybe one link that I'll mention before I kick it over to you, Chris, is just the way in which we actually use our boundaries data and our geocoding data to mutually reinforce one another. So, you think about, Chris mentioned earlier, we have postcode level boundaries that we derive ourselves. And what we use to derive those are addresses. And so there's sort of an really inherent link there. In the same way, we'll use boundaries to verify the boundaries of where our addresses fall, and ensure that there's sort of this concordance between these two data sets. So that even if they're not as integrated sort of in the front end as you might think, in the back end, actually, we're using them to quality check one another and really sort of improve accuracy all around. But we do have some exciting ideas about how to bring those closer together. And in fact, those are currently sort of in our roadmap for the next year.
Yeah, Sean, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit there, but
I've heard you give this talk about this so much. I've just
I know it's ingrained in our bones now. But yeah, so when you use the geocoder and you get that geocontext object, that's part of the response. All of those geocontext results are sourced, or most of them are sourced from boundaries. So there's basically a one-to-one if you wanted to take those results and then throw them into a boundaries map and do a choropleth on your, where your points are falling within a set of neighborhoods, or how like the various distribution of voters within sub-districts, legislative districts in New York State, or something like that. Those are generally speaking one-to-one, and we're actually expanding that and making that even more explicit next year by making those links direct, like explicit between the boundaries and the places results. So that you can actually use that for more of a direct link on your geocoding results to your maps. But yeah, it's pretty awesome that we actually incorporate the entire data ecosystem here to build these products.
So we're 5 minutes after the hour, and I want to say thank you to everybody who joined the keynote and this Ask Me Anything session. I want to thank Sean, Chris, and Robert for participating today. This is a lot of fun. We plan to have another Build with Mapbox event in the first half of 2023, and we want to keep having this be a venue where we get to share platform updates with our community, but we also have an opportunity to invite our community to share what they've invented with Mapbox with their peers and be thought leaders. So look forward to further updates in 2023. All of these sessions today were recorded, so they'll be available for replay and for sharing. And so with that, I hope everybody has a great holiday season. Thanks for joining us today.
Cheers.